In 2022, King Charles III ascended to the throne of the United Kingdom, and one of his first actions was to proclaim his son William as the new Prince of Wales, a title that has been given to the heirs of the British throne for over 700 years. This event sparked new conversations over the title and its history, and unfortunately, it seems that absolutely no one knows anything about it at all. That sounds like a joke, but it's not. Even Wikipedia seems to know nothing about the original history of the title, as the article on the Prince of Wales hilariously contains the subsections Before Prince of Wales and End of Native Princes of Wales, leaving out the entire Welsh history of the title. It seems like everyone has been getting it wrong for the past several years, and I will not stand for it. Today we're going to find out who was actually the first Prince of Wales, what was the real history of the title before its conquest by England, and how, or more importantly why, the title became attached to the English throne. And to do that, we have to travel back in time almost 9 centuries. As you might suspect, the title Prince of Wales has its origins in Wales, and here, in the year 1140, Wales looks pretty different from today. The country had been slowly invaded by the Kingdom of England over the past 524 years, and now 3 main kingdoms remained: Deheubarth in the south, Powys in the east, and Gwynedd in the north. And it is the ruler of this kingdom of Gwynedd that we are most interested in today. His name was Owain ap Gruffydd, more commonly known as Owain Gwynedd, and he was very, very ambitious. He would achieve some moderate successes against the Welsh kings and the earldom of Chester early in his reign, but one of the most prominent victories came in 1157, when Owain and his sons defeated 2 English armies and almost killed Henry II, the King of England, which I made an entire video about if you're interested. These victories seem to have had a very dramatic effect on Owain, as only a few years later he would write a letter to Louis VII seeking his friendship, offering to establish diplomatic relations, and naming himself as Rex Walia, the King of Wales. Although this title is pretty imposing, it wasn't entirely original. Owain's father, Gruffydd, seems to have portrayed himself as the King of all of Wales too, although contrary to what Wikipedia says, we have no idea what he called himself. In his only surviving act, he has no title at all, and it's very unlikely that he ever called himself Prince. This title probably came from Owain's desire to denote his wide-reaching influence amongst the kings of Wales, just like his father and forefathers before him. And as the historian John Davis says, Owain had just successfully defeated an English army for the 3rd time and almost killed their king, so his claim certainly held some substance. There was still a bit of a problem though. You see, while Owain was titling himself as king, there were many other rulers who were also calling themselves king. The historian Carrie Mound says that there were 97 kings in Wales throughout the 11th century alone, meaning that the title had become severely devalued. King Owain was proclaiming rulership over the entirety of Wales. Meanwhile, the King of Arwystli was proclaiming rulership over about 22 people and a couple of large hills. So if Owain wanted to reinforce his supremacy, he'd have to call himself something more substantial, something more principal, more princely perhaps. And late in the year of 1165 he did just that. In another letter written to Louis VII of France, Owain Waliarum Princeps, the Prince of Wales, stated his intention to seek an alliance. Princeps was quite a bold title, literally meaning principal ruler. It was one of the titles held by some of the early Roman emperors, and this imperial connotation was not lost on Henry II of England. The king and his court were furious that Owain was claiming an apparently higher-ranking title and directly challenging their control both over the still independent kingdoms of Wales, but also over the territories that they had already conquered. The stature of Owain's title would also not be lost on the Welsh, as the Latin princeps would eventually be written as tywysog, the Welsh word for leader. As we can see, contrary to what you might have thought, when Owain titled himself as prince, he didn't demote himself. The reactions of both the Welsh chroniclers and the English court show us that this was regarded as an upgrade in status, and one that the Kingdom of England had so far been unable to challenge, as only a few months before Owain's letter to Louis VII, he had dealt Henry II another crushing blow in a battle at Dyffryn Ceiriog and on the Berwyn Mountains. This 4th victory against the English was won with a coalition of Welsh kings, all led by Owain, no doubt greatly contributing to his decision to proclaim himself as the principal ruler of all of Wales, because again, that certainly held substance. While to the English, Owain may have merely been the upstart Prince of Wales, to the Welsh he was simply and supremely their leader. And to the people of the year 1170, he was dead, because that's when he died. Following his death, this new Prince of Wales title would not be carried on by his sons, as Owain seems to have not chosen an Edling, a designated heir, resulting in the competing brothers plunging their country into a civil war over who got to be in charge next. This set the stage for Owain's nephew and former ally, Rhys of Deheubarth, to proclaim himself as the new Prince of Wales, beginning the interesting and often completely unknown history of the Welsh princes. I find the creation of this title by Owain to be extremely fascinating, hence why I just dedicated the past 5 hours to talking about it. But now I'd like to fairly briefly walk you through the next 100 years of Welsh history up to the conquest by England, both so you can see how much history so often gets left out, but also so you can see how this once infuriating symbol of Welsh defiance became subservient to the English throne. While Gwynedd was embroiled in a civil conflict, Deheubarth was doing remarkably okay. Their king, Rhys, had successfully defended and expanded his realm against the English Marcher lords, and by at least 1184, although possibly a bit earlier, he had begun to title himself as the Prince of Wales. Rhys would be one of the only Welsh rulers not from Gwynedd to ever hold this title, as following his death in 1197, his sons would begin to tear his dominion apart. Although he had designated an heir, his younger offspring simply took the opportunity to ally with their powerful neighbours and seize some of the kingdom to themselves. And while a few of them would claim the frankly lamer title Prince of South Wales, there would almost never again be a Welsh Prince of Wales from anywhere other than Gwynedd. Speaking of Gwynedd, the civil war had come to a stagnation, and Owain's son, Dafydd, had secured his rule in the east of the country, naming himself as the Prince of North Wales, echoing the style of his neighbours to the south. This title, although less grand than that of his father's, was carried on by his nephew, Llywelyn, who defeated Dafydd in battle in 1194 and seized the eastern half of Gwynedd. Llywelyn, like his grandfather, was a remarkable military leader, and he would prove this fact during the English Barons' War, where he managed to seize huge amounts of territory in Wales. He became so powerful, in fact, that in 1216 he would hold a meeting with his fellow Welsh rulers at Aberdyfi, and it was here that he would be recognised as the overlord over the remaining Welsh kings. And following the death of King John of England, Llywelyn would be granted all of his conquered lands through the Treaty of Worcester. This newfound preeminence amongst the Welsh likely inspired Llywelyn to resurrect the Prince of Wales title, although in this case it would be a little different, as from about 1225 onwards he would refer to himself as the Prince of Aberfraw and the Lord of Snowdonia. Although this title is not explicitly the same as the Prince of Wales, it was very likely intended to simply be a more diplomatic version of it, as according to Welsh law, the King of Aberfraw, the capital of Gwynedd, was the only king allowed to pay tribute to England. All of the other Welsh kings had to pay tribute to Aberfraw, thereby implying that they were all subservient to the kings of Gwynedd. So by invoking his ancient right to overlordship over all of Wales, rather than just proclaiming to be its ruler like Owain did, Llywelyn hoped to simultaneously elevate his status and not anger the King of England. And this worked, as by 1231 the Kingdom of England was referring to Llywelyn as the Prince of Aberfraw. Upon Llywelyn's death, and following a crushing defeat from Henry III, his son Dafydd would revert back to calling himself the Prince of North Wales until 1245, when in another act of defiance against England, Dafydd would adopt the title Prince of Wales and offer his vassalization to the Pope, in the hope of protecting his newfound principality. But unfortunately this offer was rejected, and Dafydd would die heirless later that year. This put Gwynedd at the mercy of another English invasion. But fortunately, Dafydd's brother had left 2 adult sons, both of which took up the mantle of defending Gwynedd. And eventually, the Treaty of Woodstock was signed, and following a brief internal conflict, Llywelyn II would now be in charge of a new, shrunken Gwynedd. For the longest time, Llywelyn doesn't seem to have called himself anything. All of his surviving acts from this era simply just bear his name. However, over the next 2 decades, through a combination of diplomacy and war, Llywelyn would once again achieve a preeminent position in Wales. He defeated an army led by Henry III, and before the English king could respond again, another baronial rebellion broke out, giving Llywelyn free rein to expand. It is during this time that we see the re-emergence of the Prince of Wales title, as Llywelyn first called himself as such in a letter to the King of Scotland in 1262. But over the next few years, something very important would happen. As we've seen so far, the title Prince of Wales has been used exclusively in defiance of the Kingdom of England, both by claiming a higher rank and by directly challenging the English overlordship of Wales. However, Llywelyn knew that this wasn't sustainable. He bordered the largest, richest, and most powerful kingdom in all of Great Britain, potentially one of the most powerful kingdoms in all of Europe. If he wanted his realm to survive, he would have to have an amicable relationship with the King of England. For the next 3 years, the Prince of Wales would attempt to reach a peaceful settlement with the King of England, but Henry III just kept pulling out all the classic excuses. What a flake. But in 1265, there would be some success. The leader of the rebelling English barons, Simon de Montfort, had captured the King of England. Llywelyn had been a very useful ally to Simon, and as a reward for his assistance, Simon drew up an agreement on the behalf of the king. This Treaty of Pipton was extremely important and one of the most crucial agreements in defining what the Prince of Wales would soon become, as Llywelyn would be recognised as the Prince of Wales and as the overlord of all the native Welsh kings, but he would hold this title in subservience to the King of England. As I said before, the Prince of Wales title was created to be purposefully arrogant and challenging to the English kings, and although Llywelyn did get his peaceful settlement, his title was now supposed to be of a lesser rank. Following Simon's death in battle, the newly restored King Henry would make peace with Llywelyn, and in 1265 the Treaty of Montgomery confirmed both his conquests and his position as subservient to the English crown. So what we've seen over the past few minutes is quite a dramatic evolution of this title. It was originally created to challenge England's control over Wales, and the imperial connotations of princeps really made the King of England mad. And over the next few decades, this title would be claimed again and again in direct defiance of the English monarch, until ultimately landing with Llywelyn II. Even though he fought in defiance of his powerful neighbour, Llywelyn also sought a peaceful settlement and recognition of his principality. And while he did succeed in his goals, he also transformed the title of Tywysog Cymru, literally meaning the leader of Wales, into one subservient to the English crown. And this subservience would pave the way for this title's future relationship with the monarchy of England. So how did this relationship start then? How did this Welsh title become attached to the English throne? I hope I've shown you just how much history often gets left out of this discussion, and how the Prince of Wales evolved from a mark of defiance to a mark of subservience. But now I'd like to briefly and finally talk about its subsequent attachment to the English monarchy, and how that relationship continues to this day. To make an already long story short, Llywelyn would have a fairly amicable relationship with Henry III of England, but the same could not be said about Henry's son, Edward I, who became king in 1272. Llywelyn refused to submit to Edward in his court, citing the fact that he was housing many of Llywelyn's enemies and that his marcher lords were trying to undermine his authority in Wales. This was true and reasonable, but from a subject to the crown of England, this was also rebellious. And in 1276 and 1282, Edward I would march into Wales, seeking once and for all to destroy Llywelyn's principality. And on the 11th of December 1282, near the town of Builth, Llywelyn, Prince of Wales, would be killed. His brother, Dafydd, took on the title and continued the resistance, but only 4 months later he would be captured, convicted of treason, hanged, drawn, and quartered. The Principality of Wales would fall into the hands of Edward I and his marcher lords, but the Prince of Wales title would, for now, lie dormant. The modern Prince of Wales claims that the title has its origins with Llywelyn II, and fun fact, it's Llywelyn's coat of arms that make up the modern heraldry. And while technically they aren't wrong, as Llywelyn was the first person to hold the title in subservience to England, that still leaves out almost the entire Welsh history of the title, both before and after Llywelyn, as his brother Dafydd was not the last Welsh person to call himself prince. In 1294, Owain's great-great-great-great-grandson Madog rose up in rebellion and proclaimed himself as the new Prince of Wales. But this was unsuccessful. And in 1369, Llywelyn's brother's grandson, Owain Lawgoch, also proclaimed himself as the Prince of Wales. He attempted to lead an invasion with the assistance of France, but this ultimately fell through, and in 1378 he would be assassinated. And finally, in 1401, a man named Owain Glyndwr, a descendant of both Rhys of Deheubarth and of the royal family of Powys, would rise up in rebellion, and for a time he would be successful. In 1404, at a parliament in Machynlleth, Owain Glyndwr was formally crowned as the Prince of Wales, in front of envoys from France, Castile and Scotland, But this independence wouldn't last, and in 1413, 9 years later, his rebellion would be crushed, and Owain, the last Welsh Prince of Wales, would disappear. During the reign of the last two Princes of Wales, something very curious took place, as for the first time, both of these princes had competition, as there was already a Prince of Wales by the time they proclaimed the title for themselves. But rather than being a rival claimant from Wales, these other princes were the heirs to the English throne. Edward, Richard, and then Henry all held the title at some point during this time, but why? How did the Prince of Wales title that Edward I literally killed off become revived and attached to the English throne? Let's rewind. It's 1301 and Wales looks like this. In the north and the west, the country is largely covered by the lands owned directly by the English crown, and in the south and the east, Wales is broadly controlled by the various English marcher lords. And under the surface, a small but slowly growing class of Welsh administrators and government officials was appearing, although they were still largely banned from holding any top-level positions. To the English monarchy, these two factions posed a lot of problems. The Welsh officials were often eager to serve the crown, but they were potentially dangerous. There had already been one serious revolt only a few years ago, and on the opposite end of the scale, Edward is eager to provide a counterbalance against the power of the marcher lords in Wales, who time and time again proved to be highly disloyal. So how could Edward I reinforce royal power against these rebellious lords, and gain the loyalty of this growing class of Welsh officials? The solution was relatively simple. He chose to revive the Principality of Wales in 1301 and give the title to his son and heir, also called Edward, who had been born in Carnarvon Castle in 1284. There is a long-standing rumour that King Edward was coerced into doing this by a group of Welshmen soon after the conquest, who allegedly demanded to be led by someone who had been born in Wales and did not speak a word of English. In reply to this, Edward simply presented his newborn son as their new prince, who had been born in Wales and spoke no word of anything. Unfortunately, this story is probably not true. It only comes up in writing in 1584, long after King Edward had died, and the chronology doesn't even make any sense. Edward's son had been born in 1284, but he was made prince in 1301, meaning that he was no longer a baby by this time and that he could already certainly speak English. Furthermore, as the historian John Davis points out, when Edward was born, he was not directly in line for the throne, as he had an elder brother, Alfonso, and if Alfonso had survived until 1301, it is likely that he, as heir, would have been given the position of Prince of Wales instead. So really it seems that King Edward gifted the title to his son Edward because by 1301 he was his only son and heir to the throne, not because of where he was born. The position as prince came with all of the royal lands in Wales, and Prince Edward would have full legal control over the country, which allowed him to have a sort of practice run in government before ascending to the throne of England. And in addition, it reinforced royal power in Wales against the rebellious marcher lords, and it provided a point of loyalty for the growing Welsh administrative class, satisfying both of King Edward's goals. Prince Edward was apparently fairly popular in his role. He made an effort to improve life in his principality, and until 1536, he would be the only English king to ever summon a Welsh representation to Parliament. And following his ascension to the throne of England, he continued this position by granting the title Prince of Wales to his grandson, also named Edward, who later granted it to his son, beginning the custom of investing this title to the heir apparent of the English and later British throne, which continues all the way up to the present day, when, in 2022, King Charles III made his son and heir William the new Prince of Wales. So we've now seen how and why this title was revived and attached to the English throne. It was an opportunity for the English heir to practice running the government. It provided a symbol of allegiance for the people of Wales, and the lands of the Principality served as a strong buffer against the rebellious marcher lords. Over time, this title would become more and more ceremonial though, and in 1536, the lands and legal authority of the Princes of Wales would be abolished by Henry VIII, transforming the Principality of Wales into a dominion and a country. By now it should also be obvious why this title is controversial in Wales, as the transition from a Welsh to an English prince wasn't exactly peaceful. Edward I annexed the principality, executed the prince, and then permanently attached his title to the English throne, so it's no wonder why many people in Wales aren't happy. A recent survey showed that about 2/3 of Wales support William being the Prince of Wales, but only 19% want him to have a grand investiture like his father. The investiture is a ceremony where the Prince of Wales is formally coronated. The past 2 of these have been held in Carnarvon, the only 2 to ever be held in Wales, and subsequently the past 2 English princes are the only ones who have ever been able to speak Welsh at their ceremony. In the past, these ceremonies have been much more low-key though, and with such a small level of support for another big procession, William may just simply be invested in Parliament, like the Georgians or the very first English princes. And maybe sometime in the future, this title will be retired altogether. We've gone on a long journey today, and I hope you've all finally learnt the actual history surrounding the title. From an infuriating symbol of Welsh defiance to a mark of subservience to the English crown, the Prince of Wales title has gone through a lot, but I think it's important not to forget its early history. Wales had several princes, but these weren't demotions in status. Henry II was furious that Owain was calling himself a princeps, and it took the kings of England another century before they could seriously challenge this title. And while yes, today it is attached to the royal family of the United Kingdom, the Prince of Wales, Tywysog Cymru, was conceived as a symbol of Welsh defiance, and I think that's important to remember. From this video, you hopefully should have learnt who the first Prince of Wales was, the Welsh history of the title, how and why it became attached to the English throne, what might be in store for its future, and how poor the online discussion of this history can be, especially the Wikipedia article. So thank you for learning something, even if all you learned was that you never ever want to click on another one of my videos ever again. Thanks for watching.